Hello and welcome to the Fulhamish Quick Take with me, Dan Cook. Reaction here to the Liverpool game last night, and much like the weekend, it was spirited, gutsy performance from the Whites, but on the eve of Eurovision, ultimately it ended in 0 points for Marco's men, and it makes it 3 losses in 8 days, which was always going to be a difficult run of games. You look at Aston Villa away, Manchester City at home, and Liverpool away. Were we expected to take anything out of those games? Maybe not, but it's still tough to take, especially when you take into account it's 8 losses in 10 in all competitions for the Whites now, which is a slightly disappointing end to what has been still a fantastic season. It was an interesting team selection last night, I thought. There were some enforced changes and there were some that maybe surprised us. Cedric particularly coming in for Kenny Tete and Sasha Lukic in for Harrison Reed. I think two that surprised me. It was nice to see Willian back on the pitch, and Carlos Vinicius, probably deservedly keeping his spot. And I think he showed Marcus Silva why he should be the second choice striker at the club. It was a good start from the Whites. I thought we were lively. Harry Wilson got in quite early on and maybe should have done better. It was a good bit of defending from Virgil van Dijk to clear, but we had chances. Vinny did well early on. He got a shot off on his weaker foot. It was a very good save by Alisson in the end, and the Whites were looking pretty good. We were defensively solid. I think Liverpool were sort of reduced to just shooting from range a lot of the time. Last night there was, they had quite a few shots early on, but all of them from outside the box, and any chances that came in the area, Bernd Leno was equal to them, as we expect from Bernd. He's been fantastic so far this season. He just keeps on producing great saves and great moments for the Whites. But I think the thing that was most impressive about him last night, and we've mentioned it before, was coming off his line. There was a few times when he swept up outside his area when it looked for a moment that Salah or Nunez or Diaz had been released and got in behind us. Suddenly the camera would pan and there was Bernd Leno, dependable as ever, clearing away. So I think that's a huge thing that he brings to this Fulham side. His ability to sweep up, to allow us to play this sort of relatively high defensive line, because if you've got a keeper who's not willing to come off his line, then your defenders have to play a lot closer to your goal, and I think you give up more chances like that. And I think that's definitely something that he's brought to this team, that he holds over Marek Rodak. As good a keeper as Marek is, I don't think he's comfortable coming off his line, and Burn showing again why he is one of the best keepers in the league this season, and we are delighted to have him here. But the first half drew on, and it looked like Liverpool were the better side. They played some lovely football, and Trent was pulling strings in the middle of the park, but they didn't have many chances. And then obviously the big moment in the game, and the main discussion point of this entire game is the penalty. And I think we've got to call it what it is. And as far as I see it, that's a dive by Darwin Núñez. There's been people who have been trying to sugarcoat it and looking, maybe he's just trying to get out of the way, but it is ultimately a dive from Darwin Núñez. Yes, it's terrible for Mr. Diop. He dallies on the ball too long, and he should be clearing his lines earlier than that. But I don't think there's any discussion here that it is just a dive. There's no contact. It's a swipe at the ball from Issa, and he misses it as Darwin gets there first. But Núñez throws himself on the ground with no contact, and it's baffling to me that the VAR hasn't overturned that. I think that the criticism shouldn't be towards Stuart Atwell ultimately, because in real time, when I was watching on the television, I thought it was a penalty. I thought that just looks like a penalty, and I don't think he can be blamed for giving it. It's the VAR, it's the refereeing in the Stockley Park VAR truck that's really got to be questioned here, because I don't think they've looked at it for long enough. It seems like the check was over very quickly, and we got 3 angles of it on the television, and in none of them did there look to be any contact that would cause Núñez to go down. And I think Stuart Atwell's been done here basically by one of his colleagues, because he should have been asked to go and have a look at the screen, and for some reason he wasn't. And we've all seen, I think, that the comments from Tom Kearney after the game coming out and saying that actually Stuart Atwell said to one of our players that he didn't think it was a penalty, having seen the replay. I mean, that's the exact example of where VAR comes in. You ask the referee to go and have a look at it again and make his mind up when he's seen multiple angles of it. And so it is really frustrating to see that not get overturned. And I felt the anger of Marco and the team, and I'm sure we all did, as to feeling wronged again from refereeing decision again against top six clubs. You know, we've got all these questions flying about, which are totally valid. You know, would Fulham have got that penalty down the other end in front of the Kop? Maybe Stuart Atwell gives it in real time, but what I think is for certain is that VAR takes a longer time to look at it, and it asks Stuart Atwell to go and have a look on the monitor, because I think there's this thing that we are starting to see. Fulham against top six clubs, we are getting poor decisions given us against us, and really it's starting to get a bit tiresome, and I think we're all fed up of it, because it's so tough to come away from a game when we've been for large parts the better team and really should be getting something out of the game, and we've lost 1-0 to a penalty that shouldn't have been given. But that's at least it's happening now at this point in the season, where we don't desperately need points, but it is a real tough one to take. And you know, going in at 1-0 down at half time, we didn't deserve that. We really should have been level in the game, if not ahead. And then the second half came and the boys were fantastic again. I thought we were really, really good. We created the better chances in the half. We played some lovely football. And I think big credit to Carlos Vinicius up top, especially. We've seen a lot of, you know, comments about him this season, but it's really nice to see sort of unanimous opinion on him over the past two games, is that he led the line well again. And he looks a different player at the moment. He looks like he's got a little bit of confidence in him. He was harrying Virgil van Dijk and Konate. He was really getting after them. He was a bit more of an outlet in attack. He held the ball up better. He linked up play well. He very nearly scored. It was a really great save from Alisson, rushing off his line. So I think big credit to Carlos Vinicius, because he's had a tough time of it this season, and to have put in the two performances he has done against Manchester City and Liverpool consecutively, I think that's a really promising thing. And off the back of that, I would expect to see him starting on Monday against Leicester. I think he's earned that trust from Marco now, and hopefully he can get himself on the score sheet again, because it's been a nice renaissance for him. We've got El Dorito here with a comment which I think is quite right. Same with Tsimikas on Vinicius. I'm sure if Tosin did that on Salah, it's checked by VAR. I couldn't agree more. You know, there's more contact when Vinicius is through on goal and gets dragged down by Tsimikas than there is between Issa Diop and Darwin Núñez. So there's no consistency here, and I think there is a reticence from referees to do anything controversial in these games. And especially when you think, you know, of the atmosphere at Anfield, I don't think any referee or VAR wants to put his colleague, his referee, in the limelight like that. And they seem to brush over things so quickly that this is now twice in a week that we've had, you know, things that should have been taken, you know, take a minute, take some time, review it. And it's weird that we've gone from a stage where VAR was criticised for taking too long over things to now it seems to take no time at all. And sometimes it doesn't even seem to check it. And that doesn't make sense to me. And it's a real shame. But I think we can focus on the positives in this game. You know, there was some new players in the fold, some new partnerships. So if we looked at Sasha Lukic in midfield, that's the first time we've really got a good look at him in a while. And I thought he did commendably. You know, he doesn't offer the same intensity as Harrison Reed, but his on-ball quality is good. He's very tidy in possession. And I think this is the first time that I've watched him and thought he looks a part of this squad now. He looks a part of that midfield unit. And that was a really promising thing to see. Thought Cedric did okay at right back. There was some moments where he seemed to switch off. He played Mo Salah onside once in the first half, where, you know, maybe Salah should have done better from the chance that came from it. And he just seemed to fall asleep in that moment. But I think that's going to happen. You know, he doesn't have the same levels of communication with that back line as Kenny Tete has, because Cedric just hasn't played with them very much. And then I think the big one is that centre-back partnership between Issa Diop and Tosin, who haven't had the opportunity really to play together this season, and it was enforced through that, you know, injury to Tim Ream. But I thought they were really good together. You know, Tosin I thought was especially good in possession. His passing, we know what he brings, but his ability to break lines, you know, a couple of times he plays that pass that cuts out two lines of a press, you know, that first and second line. Tosin is able to surpass both of them and find a player in the middle of the park. A couple of times he played that lovely sort of raking ball over the top to Harry Wilson, which we saw so many times last season, and they came off beautifully, and Wilson was able to get some space in behind Tsimikas. So I thought the partnership worked well, and if it wasn't for that penalty, I think overall you'd say it's a fantastic performance by Diop and Tosin, but for one moment where, it is avoidable because Issa could have got rid of it earlier, but ultimately not his fault and not his ultimate mistake that's cost us there. So I think that there's promising signs there, and it's good to see that there seems to be a level of understanding between Tosin and Diop, which I'm sure will only grow in the last 4 games of this season. Looking ahead, they're going to start, I imagine, the majority of these final games, if not all of them. And this seems to be what the long-term plan initially was from Marco Silva. I think Diop was coming in as a Tim Ream replacement, and if it wasn't for the incredible form we've seen from Tim at the back, we probably would have seen a lot more of this partnership. But there's a positive out of that negative of the Tim Ream injury that, at least we get to test out at the end of this season to see if Tosin and Issa Diop are a viable partnership together next season. We've got Harris here with a comment. Yeah, completely agree. Vinicius was class. He led the line really well, and he looked a changed man to me. He just looked like he was more willing to chase down lost causes. He's pressing well, but I think the big thing was that the runs he was making in his link-up play just looked a lot smoother, a lot better. And I guess one of the reasons for that is we're playing to his strengths a bit better. I don't know what you guys think, but we all know that Vinny doesn't seem to be that great in the air. He's certainly not as good as Alexander Mitrovic at dealing with long balls, and we didn't do that as much last night. We actually preferred to play a little bit more to his feet, and sometimes get him on the half turn when especially in that first half when he got that shot off on his right foot, he was receiving that on the half turn and going towards goal. So I think we can see now that actually we potentially do have a viable backup striker to Mitrovic, which is a really important thing for us because we're going to need it. It's a lot to ask Mitrovic to play 38 games plus every season. And so it's promising to see that we are finding ways to play with Carlos Vinicius up top because he's not a bad player. There is a player in there, and we've seen that now. He's got that instinctive finish against City, to me, was a great... It showed to me that he is a striker who can play at this level because it was an instinctive finish on the volley after making a good run. And again, we saw more of it against Liverpool. Just to close off here before we touch on the Leicester game, as El Dorito says, does Vinicius start every game until the end of the season? Mitro's match fitness won't be sharp for almost after 2 months out. It's a valid point. Ultimately, Vinny is going to have much more sharpness in his legs when Mitro returns for that Southampton game in a week or so's time. But I think he'll be chomping at the bit to get on that pitch. Mitro will be raring to come Southampton away, and I don't imagine that there's anything that will stop him getting on that pitch. And I think Marco is desperate for him back. And I think his teammates are as well. He's such a big figure in the dressing room and on the pitch, and he's clearly liked by everyone. And so I think that Mitro will get thrown out there, and it's exciting because I expect to see us fizzing on that return. I think Mitro will be up for it. I think it's a great opportunity for him to have rested that ankle that's been causing him so much problem this season. And so hopefully he comes back raring to go. And so whilst I understand that, maybe Vinicius has the sharpness on him, I would be surprised if Mitrovic isn't starting come Saturday, 3 p.m. in Southampton. As Darkwing says, even Mitro has poor games. Vinicius has done well against the big club, scored a few goals. To expect him to come in and be 100% straight away, feel like expectations were too high. Absolutely. And we've been blessed in a way to have one of the best strikers around, and certainly one of the best to do what he does. No one is as good at what Mitrovic does as he is in the Premier League, I don't think, as a pure target man who's great in the air and strong and also just such a reliable finisher. And it was too much for us to expect Vinicius to come in and to stand up to that sort of level of performance. But as you say, he's had games against big clubs where he's produced moments for us, not just the past 2 games, but if you think back, he got us that winner against Chelsea, and we'll always remember Vinny for that, regardless of what happens next. I think he will go down in Fulham folklore for that header, and he has played well in all 3 of those games. It's been times when we've been disappointed with his output, but it's nice to see growing support for him coming now, and hopefully that means he can kick on. And looking forward to the Leicester game, I would expect to see him leading that line again. And there were calls from me in particular. I did say for the Liverpool game, I was hoping that we would maybe go with a Dan James or a Bobby up top, just because I thought their pace, their dynamism might be more use against Liverpool, but they wouldn't have done a better job than Vinny last night, because I thought he was excellent. Just to close off, as I think Jim's got this perfectly, who would have the guts to tell Mitro he's not playing? Yeah, I don't think Marco would dare sit down in front of Alexander Mitrovic next week and say, you're starting on the bench, because this man loves playing football. I don't think that he loves scoring anything, loves more than scoring goals on a regular basis for Fulham Football Club. So there's no way I can imagine that he won't be starting come Southampton. Thank you very much for joining me on the quick take. It's always tough doing these after a loss, but there's lots of positives. And despite the poor run of form, it's fantastic to see Fulham where we are in the league, but also this positivity that we are making games of every opponent. It doesn't matter. Villa away is a really tough game. We made a game of it, but then you look at Manchester City at home and Liverpool away. These are games that Fulham used to roll over and have their bellies tickled for. The old Fulham would have been dispatched 3 or 4-0 in both of those games. This is a new team, and we are battling, and we are set for this level. We are good enough. We are a Premier League side, and hopefully, come Leicester at home at the week on Monday, we can return to winning ways, put 3 points on the board, and really cement ourselves as the team that will finish above Chelsea this season. And how often do we get to say that? Thank you for joining me. Have a lovely weekend, and come on, you Whites.